of did. It's just, it was what was it? Misunderstanding.
A misunderstanding. Can you go on camera and make a statement?
Do I want to though? I mean, I technically can't.
No, but it's okay. I'm not like part of the news or anything. I'm not part of the news.
I mean, you're okay to film, I guess. I don't care. Just not on my property.
Are you a member of the church?
I live here.
You live here? Okay. Was the pastor here?
Not here. So, but yeah.
Was he arrested?
I don't know.
Hi, besties. It's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Well, the Robert Shinn federal raid has taken over the media, and there's been a lot of questions about what's happened. Are people in custody? Is there charges yet? And what all were they looking for? And as the weekend has transpired, we've learned a little bit more about what happened. And I can also give you some information based upon previous reports related to what the IRS might be looking at, as well as the issues with the COVID fraud that they're allegedly looking at, along with labor violations. It was in March and in April of 2022 that a couple former members of Shekinah Church that had been with the church for decades reported Robert to the IRS for conversion of nonprofit money and then funneling it into a for-profit business, which is illegal. Robert would take money donated to a church, which is non-exempt, and then instead of using the money for the church, he was using it to start businesses and promote businesses and create businesses, funneling money that hadn't been paid for, hadn't been taxed, and then using it for a business to avoid paying taxes. It's tax evasion. There's a lot of different angles with the tax evasion that occurred with Robert. That's just the most major one and a huge issue. But there's also other issues happening here because a lawsuit that was filed against him in Los Angeles County, which I've talked about many times, includes numerous victims of Robert. And he's being sued by Alicia Lee, Marilyn Gonzalez, David Gonzalez, Kylie Douglas, Kalia Gray, Aubrey Fisher, and Kevin Davis. And their cross complaint has allegations of, and it's a lot, fraud, promissory fraud, human trafficking, aiding and abetting human trafficking, forced labor, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress, sexual battery, gender violence, work environment harassment, physical battery, aiding and abetting battery, and conversion. There's 52 different counts against him, okay? And the church itself is set up kind of like a pyramid with Robert at the top. And then he has a group of people below him that are called mentors, and then another group of people below them called sub-mentors. And as they get further up in the pyramid, they get more power, they get more gifts, they get more control, but they're all under the authority of Robert Shinn. And he holds all the power, and he has all these other people doing things for him. The mentors are what they would say are the deputies of Robert, and they do his bidding. One of the complaints is on information and belief, Robert took essentially 100% of what longtime members, including Alicia Lee, made after those members were allowed to pay for basic necessities, such as car payments, insurance, and income tax, as well as minimal monthly allowances. Some of the members that are suing him lived on as much as $100 every week after working hours, like 40 to 60 hours. And the money that was used to tithe to the church was not used to help the church. Instead, it was used for him to travel, buy luxury vehicles, and never giving and like living a life of luxury. So he and his deputies are living like more affluent than everyone else. And then everyone else is basically living in modern day slavery. One of the biggest complaints here in terms of like the sex trafficking has to do with Alicia Lee. And she's just one of the victims, but her case, which was discussed at and in the series Dancing for the Devil, the 7M TikTok cult, she describes how that over the years, Robert confined her into controlling her housing, controlling access to a vehicle, controlling her bank accounts, forcing her to work 40 plus hours a week, and closing millions of dollars in sales in real estate, but only making a small salary, which ultimately was not her it wasn't really even going to her. It was all going to Robert. And his wife Hannah controlled her bank account, controlled her car access to cars, and controlled her freedom. So she had to ask if she wanted to have a car to leave. She often didn't have a car to leave. They would take her keys sometimes. She was forced to live in like communal housing with a bunch of other people. And he also, through that, while he was her quote unquote employer and taking all of her money, also forcing her to engage in unconsensual sex. And then also trying to use her to sleep with people within the church or other clients that he deemed he could get something from. And one of her claims is that Robert wanted her to sleep with another member who had access to a wealthy and influential family in Korea in the K-pop industry. And because of that, he wanted her to sleep with this guy so that they could get access to that information. Now, she's just one of the victims that's in this case. There were multiple women that went to the police and several of them are not suing him. So, from a public standpoint, you have to just think of it as like Alicia's civil complaint represents one victim, but there are many victims. When she wanted to leave in 2022, right before she left, she was brutally assaulted by Hannah Shinn, according to her complaint. So, this case went through a lot of motions to strike and demurs trying to get rid of parts of it by him, but ultimately the court found that Alicia properly pled the counts for human trafficking. And what her complaint states is that they had control over her life. It was limited by them. They deprived her of her liberty and an intent to force her to provide labor and services. They coerced her into performing services and having her liberty restrained by means of a plan and a scheme enacted by Robert, Shirley, and Shekinah to cause her to believe that if she did not perform such services, she would be disobeying the man of God and would suffer serious harms by means of a plan or scheme enacted by Robert, Shirley, and Shekinah. They intended to cause her to believe that if she did not perform such services, she would be disobeying the man of God, would suffer serious harm, including her and her family going to hell, inviting Satan into her and her family's life, becoming demon possessed, experiencing anxiety and depression, potentially losing her job, and being physically assaulted by other Shekinah members, which she alleges in this complaint. She had to ask for permission to receive medical care. She was not allowed to complete her own taxes. She suffered serious physical, psychological, and financial harm as a result of their scheme. And then she's also suing them for aiding and abetting. There's forced labor claims by her. There's fraud, real estate fraud filed against them. There's promissory fraud. It's a very extensive case. And prior to this case, the only other time he had been sued, they were able to get out of it under the technicality of freedom of speech under the First Amendment and the freedom of churches to do what they want to do. Now, that was back in 2008, well before there was more, I think, known about coercive control and just the nature of this church itself. And I think today in 2025, it's going to be very different because on top of a lot of this also includes immigration fraud. So one of the aspects of in these complaints is that some of these people during a period of time while they were at the church were not legally documented workers. And Robert would lure them into the church and he would offer them jobs. And then he would like hold a carrot over their head and say that if you do this, I'll give you a green card. And then he would force them to work for him for next to nothing. And then he would house them wherever he wanted to house them. They had to eat whatever they were fed. They only were allowed to, buy things with permission. And he also arranged marriages with people to get undocumented workers legally married and getting them a green card. So there's a lot of layers to this story. It's not just, okay, it's sex trafficking and it's money laundering. It's so much more. It's money laundering of taking money from the church and putting it into for profit businesses. It's human labor trafficking, making and forcing people to work for next to nothing while controlling all of their lives and making them report everything to him throughout the day, controlling their bank accounts, controlling their taxes, controlling who they speak to and how they speak to people. Um, and the sex trafficking is a complicated one because it's not your traditional sex trafficking in that the women are forced to engage in commercial based sex, but rather they exist to work for him and then serve him sexually at any time of day. And his deputies would help arrange these girls to meet with him for private meetings. So in 2008, Robert was accused by at least 6 or 7 or 8 girls of sexual assault. And in order for him to get them interested in him sexually, he would start by inviting them to have private meetings with him and he would have them massage him. And then the massages would then move into him having them massage parts of him. And then it would move into desensitizing enough that they would engage in intercourse with him. And all under the guise of, this is holy, you're getting close to God, you will be my woman of God. But at the same time, they can't say no to him because he controls their living situation. He controls their bank accounts. He controls their phones. He controls their cars. And so it's just these women live as the ones that he did this to, slaves to him, basically. And they're used not just for sex, but also for labor. And then he's the one that gets all of this money. And for years, he's been able to hide under a cloak of religion. But if they can determine that this case isn't about religion, but instead a shell of a religion being used to run a criminal scheme, that's where they're going to get him. And it's going to be, in my opinion, very difficult for Robert to explain why his money from his nonprofit is being used to make and fund businesses, and why the money from the nonprofit is being used to fund his lifestyle, and why his church doesn't give accurate statements about tithing and donations, and they keep no records about where the money actually goes within the church. There's also incidences when it comes to COVID fraud. His group did take out some PPP loans, and instead of paying the people that they were supposed to be paying, like their employees, they were accused of spending the money themselves. Now, it's not millions of dollars, but it's enough, hundreds of thousands of dollars for sure across all the different businesses. They also are accused of doing unemployment fraud. So what they did was they took out PPP loans, and then they also had their employees take out unemployment like from the state. And instead of the unemployment being paid to their employees, they took the money from their employees. They also had their dancers pro- and provided their dancers with fraudulent vaccination cards, which were required in Los Angeles on sets, whether it was for films, movies, or any industry content that has anything to do with SAG. And at that time, every set was requiring vaccines. And so they obtained fraudulent vaccine cards as well. So there's all these different layers of why he's being investigated. And the Department of Labor is likely involved because of the forced labor of Robert has it set up. So it seems like all these different companies are being separate entities, but all of the money is going to him. So he uses things in this way. So the dancers have to pay for a videographer. Well, the videographers that they have to pay are members of the church, Isaiah and Reno. So they charge money to the dancers to film, but then those videographers directly pay Robert. So it's like laundering money directly to Robert. They also have to pay for editing They have to pay for rent. They all live in housing that is set up by Robert. The rental agreements are organized and signed by Shirley Kim or Matthew Shinn, who are the real estate agents and brokers for Robert. Their CPA, Christina Keller, does all of their taxes. They have to have permission to post on social media. They have to have permission about what to post, what not to post. They have to check in with their mentors throughout the day and tell them what they've eaten, who they've talked to, what they're doing. Everything is filtered through their mentors and then through Robert. And on social media, a lot of people are leaving comments on Miranda Derrick's pages and the other dancers like B Dash and Vic and Kendra and Ches. And the only thing I would say to all of you is that be mindful that these people are very brainwashed. They are not in control of their lives. They are living in an alternate reality where they believe they must follow Robert or something very harmful is going to happen to them. Some of them have already very likely faced very strong consequences. And we know that Chloe Shinn, Robert's daughter, used to drive Miranda to Robert's house for private meetings. So they're victims. It's easy to say, like, oh, Miranda, get out. You're so ignorant. How did you fall for this? But if your whole life is being isolated and controlled, and then if you're afraid that if you speak out and you say anything, you might get beaten or you might have more restrictions placed on you. You might have your phone taken from you. You might be moved into a different place. You might be isolated from meetings. You might not be invited to go to church events. You might be not allowed to film content. You may lose privileges. They're going to do whatever Robert says. And also, to be clear, it's highly unlikely they know the truth of what's going on because Robert filters everything through this cycle that I, Katie, am responsible for everything that's happening out here. He literally blames me for influencing everyone to tell a story about him and that I've told everyone to fabricate these things about him because I don't like Christians. So they have a very convoluted understanding of what's going on. They are told that it's not sexual abuse. He's just an unfaithful husband. They're told that having sex with him is, being close to God. They're taught that if they give all of their money to him, they will get rewards. But then at the same time, if they don't get money and they don't give money to him, they can have penalties again where they lose restrictions. They might get physically assaulted. They could get beaten. So you have to be so careful with these people. They look like normal people, but they're not. They're victims, even the men. But those higher up in the scheme, you don't have to have as much sympathy for because they're helping Robert execute the fraud, but they don't have the public presence. So just don't be mean to Miranda. I know for a fact that her family wants nothing more for Miranda that to get safe, to get out of this, to leave. They don't want the public to be nasty to her. They just want to know that Miranda's safe and away from this. And in time and in space, maybe once he's finally arrested, she will free herself. But for right now, she hasn't. So that's kind of a laundry list of what he is facing. And why was SWAT needed? Well, that's because Robert's team has a history of known violence. They also are individuals that are known to have guns. And one of the people that lives on the compound is a convicted armed robber. So it's important that they had prepared for the most severe case and risky case so that there was no harm to anyone. And nobody was injured as a part of this. So thank goodness. So for now, that's where we're at. No arrests, but this isn't going to go away. And while Robert and his mentors are gloating on Instagram through their fake accounts, he will be arrested. He will. It's coming. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.